Documentary of the Self. In this mini video, I will be going through 3 areas of philosophy. First, metaphysics, then ethics, then finally, the philosophy of science. First, we actually have to see what metaphysics actually is. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies first principles of being, identity, change, space-time, and other necessary things like that. Now that we're done that part, me explaining what metaphysics is, I will move into a topic that is covered in metaphysics called consciousness and existence. Consciousness is what I'm experiencing right now, and also existence is what I'm experiencing right now. Consciousness is an elusive thing because nobody can really describe it. It's like smoke and mirrors, an illusion. Plato even stated that true reality is not found by the senses. I personally believe that consciousness is this elusive thing. You're experiencing it, but just because you're experiencing it doesn't mean you fully understand it. Moving on to our second topic in metaphysics, mind and matter. What is mind and matter? So the mind or the soul is a non-physical substance, while the body is a physical substance. And some philosophers like Descartes would go on arguments to say that the mind can actually exist without the body because the mind is a non-physical substance that it can transcend space and time. Descartes was the man responsible for the saying, "I think, therefore I am," or broken down, "I am able to think, therefore I exist." And that gives a lot of proof because if you're thinking, therefore you do exist. I don't know if I believe in all of Descartes' teachings, but for the most part, what he says makes sense. Moving on to the last thing that I'm going to be talking within metaphysics is free will. Firstly, we actually have to talk about what free will is. Free will is the power or capacity to choose among alternative acts in certain situations, independent or natural of social or divine restraint. There are many philosophers that believe in determinism. Determinism is basically the opposite of free will, that everything is laid out on a path or written down in stone. Every single action that you do is already basically planned out from your birth. I do believe in you having free will because it just makes sense to me. I have the ability of choosing whatever thing I would like to do at the moment. I can choose to record this video, for instance, or I could choose to slack off and do nothing. Some people try to use the determinism or not having free will as a way of getting out of situations, like some prisoners believe that they shouldn't face these crimes because they had no control of their actions. Now moving on to ethics. Ethics, to put it simply, is a branch of knowledge that details with moral principles. The first thing I'll be talking about within ethics is cultural relativism. This is the view that ethical and social standards reflect upon the culture which they're derived from. This basically means that wherever you come from is where you really get your moral compass from. An argument that can be made for cultural relativism is that the Greeks believed that eating the dead was wrong, whereas the Sicilians believed that eating the dead was right, and it's because of culture that they differentiate in how they deal with their dead. An argument against cultural relativism is that this theory opposes the belief and objectivity of moral truth, that there is a truth, a universal truth in this universe. There cannot be if cultural relativism does in fact exist. Speaking of which, is there a universal moral code? Many people say no. People even go as far as to say that they should not be even asking this question in the 21st century. I have to agree with them on this one, because there are different reasons why people commit different crimes, but there are also different reasons why people do different things day to day. For example, murder would be bad in most senses. If I went across the street and I murdered a random person, I would be looked at as a psychopath and as someone that is pure evil. But let's say I join the army and go off to war, and then I kill a random person that I just see that's on the opposite side, I'm a hero. Same action, different consequences, different outlooks, and different reasons why. But moving on from that, do we owe anything to each other? Most people seem to think so. Like for example, moral contractualism. This is the view that right and wrong in our conduct is somehow understood. This means that people understand basic human decency, and also that means that people just know what's right and wrong biologically. I personally believe that we do owe something to each other. I'm a person, you're a person, everybody's people. Let's just be nice to each other. And now the final philosophy that I'll be going through during this video, the philosophy of science. What is the philosophy of science? Philosophy of science is the philosophy that is concerned with all the assumptions, foundations, methods, and implications of science. The first topic that we'll go through is falsification. The falsification theory was proposed by Karl Popper, and what he basically said was that science needs to be tested over and over again to make sure that it is in fact true. I think that this is important because when we're using science, we want to know that it's undeniably true and we're not using false information in our ideologies and the way that we live. The second topic that we're going to look at is empiricism. Empiricism in philosophy is the view that concepts originate in experience, that all concepts are about or applied to things that can be experienced. Just like falsification, this needs evidence base to prove that the facts are actually correct. I don't 100% agree with this because there are, for example, different light rays which we cannot experience, and thus we can't experience it. Thus, it means it's not true by empiricism. Last but not least, the topic that I'm going to cover is induction. Induction is a process of reasoning where instances of which we have no experience resemble those of which we have had experience. In other words, it is a process of reasoning in which the premise of an argument supports the conclusion but does not ensure it. Personally, I wouldn't use this way of thinking because I want my argument to be fact-based, and I also want my argument to support its conclusion, kind of like induction, but I want it to support all the points. I hope you like this video and